Hi, I'm Lenice Brothers, a registered nutritionist, women's health, hormone, and menstrual cycle coach, and the founder of Eat, Love, Move, a nutrition and well-being practice. This is the Period Story podcast, where in each episode, I sit down with a guest to talk about their period story. We get behind some of the myths and misconceptions about periods and so much more. Now, on to today's guest. For the last episode of season 4, I'm so excited for you to hear my conversation with Lola Ross, who is a fellow nutritionist and the co-founder of the amazing menstrual cycle and mood tracking app, Moody Month. If you haven't downloaded the app already, I definitely suggest that you check it out. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. On today's show, we have Lola Ross, so I'm really excited to interview. Lola is a registered nutritionist like me, and she's founded a amazing period and menstrual cycle tracker, Moody Month. Welcome to the show.
Lenice, thank you for having me.
Let's get into the first question I ask all of my guests, which is, tell me the story of your very first period.
Well, it's actually funny because I was thinking about that quite recently, just because I was having a conversation with somebody else about their first period. And actually, I took my first period really in my stride. I was, I think, 12, maybe 13. And I already I'd already kind of experienced it through my older sister, who's only 18 months older than me. So she kind of had her period. We were talking about it. We were really excited. And then I was just kind of waiting for mine to arrive. And so when it did, I was just happy to kind of join the club, so to speak. And yeah, and so so the reason why I'm laughing is because I was quite geeky when I was younger. I used to archive lots of things, collections of like laces and, you know, stinky stickers and, you know, all these kinds of like collectible things. I even had like stamps at one point. And I remember, and I used to write a diary avidly when I was younger. And I remember taking my first period day knickers, and I actually cut them and stuck them inside my diary, and I covered it with like plastic, and that was like the moment, and I had it in my diary. So I kept this diary for years and years and years, but for some reason it's disappeared. So I'm hoping that it hasn't ended up in some random book seller's store, secondhand store, and someone's going to be like, what is this period stain cut out in this bloody diary? Anyway, yeah, so that was my first period.
Wow, so you saved your knickers for posterity. Do you remember what you felt around that time and what perhaps you wrote in the diary?
You know, I can't remember what I wrote in the diary, but as I said, I felt good about having the period. I felt like I joined the club with my big sister. It kept us bonded. And I guess I probably wrapped up in that I felt more mature and more grown up, and, you know, I could have those conversations with the other girls in the, you know, in our locker room about, has anyone got a tampon? That kind of thing. So, yeah.
And you said you felt grown up. So you had the conversations with your friends at school. How did you learn about, apart from the conversations with your sister, how else did you learn about what was happening to you and beyond just getting your period?
So I come from a really big family of women. You know, I have lots of aunties, or some of them are not with us, but I had, you know, aunties who were very close, female cousins, similar age to me, my sister. So we spent a lot of time together in my childhood. So those conversations around periods and kind of changes, bodily changes and adolescence and stuff were very free and open. So I guess I learned a lot from within my family setting. But again, at school, you know, the standard menstrual health education that was churned out. I got a bit of that, which at the end of the day is biology, and, you know, it was informative. I mean, even if now we look at that kind of teaching as so kind of bizarre that, only the girls were allowed to learn about it. It was treated in a very hush-hush kind of like, okay, well, this is what happens to you each month, so get on with it, girls, but keep it quiet. Now that is changing, obviously, but yeah, obviously I found it useful at the time, for sure. And then we got free tampons at the end of the session, so...
When you got your period, you said you felt like you were part of a club. Did you continue to have a positive experience with your period as you went through your teenage years?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I never kind of mastered, I didn't ever really go on any hormonal contraceptive during my teenage years, so I didn't ever have that kind of... So I never sort of was advised to take that because I was managing some sort of menstrual health problems, or even starting to be sexually active. I wasn't using hormonal contraceptives, so I was very kind of in tune with my period, and don't recall it being a problem until actually I got into my 20s, when I noticed it started to get a bit heavier. I noticed issues around sort of mood changes, each month. So, yeah, but on the whole, not really a problematic thing. I think my experience of periods were pretty good. However, I was pregnant when I was 23, and I had a pregnancy when I was 23, and I do recall that after having my son, there were some changes to my menstrual cycle. Just noticed that things were, got sort of heavier. My symptoms around my menstrual cycle were different, and perhaps not as, not pleasant symptoms. And it was around that time that I kind of really got switched on to understanding my body and being more in tune with it, realizing that actually, when I kept my body weight to a certain level, I would experience perhaps sort of better health for me, or if I ate certain things, I would feel, better around my menstrual cycle. So that's actually kind of partly what led me into studying my degree in nutritional therapy and health sciences.
You started to tune into your menstrual cycle, and then when you made the changes around what you ate, did you notice a difference in the bleeding?
The flow?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, so interestingly, when I was at university studying for my degree, we had a polyclinic, which was a working clinic where we would have, live patients, and we saw them for, 2 years of the degree. And lots of women who came into the clinic who we'd treat and who I was learning through or learning with had menstrual health problems. And that's where it really started to kind of click for me that the impact of diet and lifestyle in helping to modify and improve menstrual health symptoms and reproductive health symptoms. So in theory, yes. For me, certainly adopting certain changes, incorporating certain nutrients, exercising in a different way, limiting stress in my life, that type of thing, for sure, reduced issues around the sort of heavy bleeding and menstrual kind of emotional side of things. Yeah.
After you were able to resolve those issues, what would you say your relationship with your period was like as you went through your 20s and then into your 30s?
So I think that understanding my body more, obviously I was doing my degree, I graduated, I then, was using this knowledge, in my work, and working with women and in this area and seeing the results and seeing how incredible, if you just focus on, these natural approaches to menstrual health imbalances, how beneficial that can be. So I was really charged up and energized by seeing those results, in myself, because obviously, you do things for yourself, but you don't know if that's just you, and you don't know if it's going to work with lots of other people. But, I see this in clinical practice. I see the benefits of all this, as you probably do as well. So that really sort of charged me forward. And my relationship with my period, sorry, Lenise, I think I'm really meandering with the question. I think I was answering the question I wanted to answer. What did you say? Sorry.
What was your relationship like? What did it become after, when you first got your period? It was cool. You were part of the gang, part of the club. And then through your 20s and 30s, after having gone through a pregnancy, your period changing, how did your relationship change as you started to resolve some of the issues that you had?
So I guess just being prepared, thinking about my period in a different way, in a deeper way, trying to kind of understand the rhythm of my cycle. And this was before the kind of language that we have now around the 4 phases, around, tapping into your superpowers and looking at that sort of cluster of symptoms that are associated with PMS as a potentially positive things. So I was certainly tracking my symptoms and tracking my experience, but more in my head. It wasn't something that I was, writing down or obviously logging. We didn't have those apps in those days. So I guess that was my relationship. I was much more aware of what was going on for me. And then if I found that there were changes, for example, if I did have a particularly heavy period 1 month, or I was suffering for some reason around my menstrual cycle, I would stop and reassess and look at my diet again, and maybe review my supplement protocol and address my health through that, through those methods. Yeah.
Given the work that you do and your vast clinical experience, why do you say that we don't get taught about these things in school? We get taught about the biology of periods and potentially the menstrual cycle. Why do you think we don't get taught that, we can be proactive about managing our menstrual health?
Why do you think we are not taught?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really good question. I guess it takes a long time for, the science that, is published and discussed with NICE and the Public Health England and all of these different kind of bodies to filter down into the kind of accessible language and that we know now and that many of us use and is out there. But I guess it will come. I think that it would be really important. It would be really useful, actually, for the NHS, for example, to employ more nutritional therapists, for example, who do deal with this kind of language to help consult on sort of education around menstrual health in schools, for example. That would be really great, and it would bring things into it would modernize the approach in teaching this area of science and biology to children from the digital age who have access to so much information that's easier to digest.
Yeah. It's interesting because you said that the language has changed and people have a different vocabulary now to talk about their periods and their menstrual health. And I certainly see it, and it's becoming more accessible. In your clinical practice, what are the things that you most typically see?
In terms of health?
Menstrual health.
Oh, menstrual health. Okay. So I would certainly say we're looking at sort of that emotional side. So looking at emotional shifts, at anxiety, and depression. So lots of mood related issues that are cyclical. So they come within the ovarian cycle at specific times. And usually, my patients are very aware of that and very aware of the association between their menstrual cycle and these mood swings. So looking at that is major. I would also say that weight management is also quite key. When you think how hormonally driven our appetite is and our, weight, how we manage weight and how we metabolize weight and our energy, it is, and it's very much, connected to the menstrual cycle. So yes, weight issues and mood, anxiety and depression are really key.
It's interesting you say weight issues because it's, you and I both as health professionals, as clinical practitioners, know that weight has an impact on health, but it feels sometimes that it's hard to have those conversations because there is so much, there's rightly so, there's a big conversation about anti-diet culture, but it feels like some of the nuance around that has been lost because, as you say, weight management is important because of, certainly if you have a lot of adipose tissue, it can be estrogenic, and that can have an impact on hormone and menstrual health. So it feels tricky to certainly have these conversations in public without then almost not getting attacked, but people saying, oh, well, you're just getting into diet culture, when there's a legitimate health conversation around how weight management affects hormone and menstrual health.
Absolutely. As I said, when I'm dealing with my clinical practice, women who come to see me around the weight issue are bringing it up themselves. So, it's not me saying, well, I think that you need to. They've come to talk about this. And as you'll know, as soon as you start that, listening to the patient's story and understanding, what's the history there? What were the triggers? What's mediating this situation? And starting to make these connections between perhaps overweight and mood issues around, menstrual cycle health, and perhaps there's acne involved, or perhaps there's, these different issues. And actually, as practitioners, we're able to see that, well, that sounds like imbalance. So actually, your weight management is something that you see and you may want to address, but actually we're also going to address some of these underlying things that you can't see necessarily, but you're feeling them and experiencing them because there's an imbalance there. Your body is out of balance. So, and then it's up to people to, if they want to kind of listen to that and hear it in that way, rather than thinking that that's a focus on an aesthetic level or whatever. But yeah.
So separating it out from a legitimate health conversation from it being more of an aesthetic conversation that's kind of steeped in diet culture. So separating those two, I completely agree with it, and that's what I do in my practice. I never say to anyone, oh, I think you need to lose weight. I couldn't imagine having that conversation. But if they come to me and say that, as with you, that's a concern, then I will help them address it.
Completely. And, that's our kind of, as good practitioners, we're going to, look after, the people that come to see us and treat them sensitively and all of that. Of course, and I think you would, totally agree with this, if we're identifying a condition like polycystic ovarian syndrome, we know the relationship between insulin there and, weight gain. And we know that by modifying and reducing weight in that picture, you can really help reduce the polycystic ovary kind of symptomology across the board. So, in that instance, yes, I would suggest weight loss as part of that protocol for sure.
Okay. I want to ask about some of the work that you do. You said that you take a personal interest in female reproductive health issues, including those that disproportionately affect Black women. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I'm personally interested in that myself. What issues do you typically see when looking at Black women?
So again, it may not be something that's a sort of named condition. I see mood disorders as a common issue in some of my Black patients, female patients. So that's actually something that's quite common. And actually, when you look at the numbers there, Black women in the UK have very high rates and risk of mental health disorders, which is, why, and, how are they being supported? And, that's a major thing. If you don't have your mental health in check, it's difficult. Life is very, very difficult, and you're not living your best life. So that in itself is a major one. However, there are issues that, that we know about, such as fibroids, uterine fibroids, which is now being discussed. In America, I understand that, they are putting in, millions of dollars into the research of uterine fibroids and the risk in Black women, which is a major thing, because this is a condition that can affect fertility. This is a condition that can affect quality of life enormously, and Black women have been living with it for a long time. So, to understand more about why, this is going on is going to be really, really, important, and great research.
Yeah, I think going in deeper into fibroids and how they affect Black women is going to be so powerful, and hopefully we'll move away from. I was speaking to this doctor who specializes. He's out in, I want to say Georgia, in the U.S., and he was saying that in the U.S., hysterectomy is the number one treatment for fibroids, and I just think that's so crazy, because you have these women who don't need to have a hysterectomy, there are other routes that they can take, who are having these unnecessary hysterectomies, and then having to deal with the aftermath, whether they have a partial hysterectomy or a full hysterectomy. And I just, speaking to clients who have come to me and said, yeah, my doctor, I have these fibroids, and my doctor says to me, the only route for me is a hysterectomy. And then talking to them about the potential alternatives. For them, they've come to me and said, it's life-changing, because they can then think about, well, perhaps I can then go on to have a child.
Yeah, absolutely. But, what's really exciting, Denise, is that there are, some brilliant Black doctors here in the UK who have, so much knowledge around this issue, and, have researched them in their degrees, in their medical degrees. And I've been chatting with quite a few in recent weeks. And, so, the interest and the qualified people to do undertake, and carry out this research, they're out there. And, yes, so, I'm really, really optimistic that we're going to be moving into a time where Black women's health is, going to be a focus, and more of a focus, and research. The money is going to be put into the research. Yeah.
I want to go back to what you were saying about mood issues and the effects that they've disproportionately had on Black women in the UK. So firstly, can you tell me a little bit more what you mean when you say mood issues?
So mood issues, so that could be anything from anxiety, low mood fluctuations, depression, mild depression, clinical depression, just negative thinking. I mean, there's a whole, obviously, spectrum of things that come under mood disorders. Obviously, if someone's dealing with something much more serious, like, whatever, schizophrenia or something, that's out of my remit. But those types of issues that can be affected by hormonal issues or can be exacerbated by, obviously we never know all the aspects that are going on in a person's life until they come into the practice and we talk, and hopefully we get that information out of them and we can look at the issues, the other things that are going on in their environment. But often diet, when you're not feeling good, diet can be disrupted or it can be not a focus. And actually the very act of looking after themselves through improving diet, perhaps looking at different nutrients, perhaps getting on a supplement protocol. It could be that they are also experiencing very heavy bleeds. Perhaps they've got iron loss and then iron deficiency. They're not, that hasn't been addressed, and that can obviously affect mood regulation, mood balance. So there are lots of things to look at, and I'm not saying that nutrition is going to be the fix-all for a mood disorder, but it's definitely one part of the plan.
You're the co-founder of an app called Moody. So this kind of segs nicely into the conversation about the work you do here. So tell listeners more about why you decided that building an app called Moody was the right thing to do.
Are you talking about the name or the actual app content?
Both.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if we've discussed it before. Maybe we have. It's just obviously some people ask us about the name all the time. So I'll go back to the story. So Amy, who is our CEO and the founder of Moody, we met maybe 4 years ago. And, it really was a kind of stars aligning moment where she was ready, and she was exiting a business that she had set up, and she was ready for creating something new. And she had this incredible idea that was in its embryonic stage, and it was just ideas and, a few calculations and things. And we met, and we just used to meet in these cafes and just like flesh things out and come up with ideas around the concept of this app. And, we did this for about six or 7 months and just really enjoyed each other's energy around it and company. It just felt so right, more right than anything. I'm pretty well done in my work career. So we were doing all this, and then very quickly we started to put some of these ideas down and create a platform, so a web platform. And we wanted to sort of kind of own this space and start putting this content. So we were kind of writing articles and doing something on a very low budget, but we got it out there. And then we basically started, we did a soft launch, and we launched the concept of Moody. And with our networks in sort of creative agencies and in media and stuff like that, we managed to have this incredible launch, and there was so much excitement around the product and the idea of it. And from there, we raised money. So we raised money based on the concept, based on the existing web platform, and these amazing ideas for the app. So talking about the actual name Moody, so it just felt like a no-brainer. I mean, actually, it was just that idea that we wanted to kind of reclaim this word, the moody cow, what happens in your period, and it's all these negative associations around your menstrual cycle being moody. But actually, moods are what makes us human, and moods can be positive and more reflective. Sometimes we can certainly experience moods as a very negative experience, but actually we are delving deeper into that. We're looking at, well, why do you experience that kind of mood? Is that a time for you to be reflective during your cycle? Is that a time to be quiet and more insular and get on with something that's quieter if you're not feeling social and gregarious and all of those things. It doesn't have to be seen as negative, I guess. And it's that whole kind of talk about tapping into your superpowers, you know, during your cycle, and looking at each of those moods as something to kind of tap into and utilize and help to optimize, you know, your sort of day and experience.
I really love that, because we get taught, there's this kind of cultural message that we get taught that mood swings and being, like, as you say, a moody cow is inevitable, and something that we just, as when we have a period or we have periods, we that's just part of having a menstrual cycle, having a period, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I really, really love what you said about how, you know, we have moods. They're range from all ends of the spectrum, and when we need to embrace these moods rather than looking at them as something to fight against. And that's quite countercultural, I'd say, certainly at this moment.
Well, I think that, you know, we've had, I mean, you know, it's been such an amazing space to be part of, you know, growing Moody Month. You know, we're obviously so proud of the product that we've created, you know, visually, conceptually, the amount of work and the experts that we've had involved in creating the app has been, you know, it's just been a privilege to be part of it. And, you know, we know from our feedback that lots of women have found it, you know, of use and continue to. And, you know, as we go forward, we've got some amazing ideas for the app that are coming over the next years. We've actually got a book coming out as well. Amy's actually authored this book called Moody, which is coming out in March 2021. So, you know, that's exciting as well. So that's kind of going to kind of condense and kind of expand on some of the concepts around hormone behavior and the female experience. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Well, I'll definitely look out for that. So with the app itself, how long has it been? It's been around for 3 years. Since you launched the app, kind of getting more into the idea of female entrepreneurship, what kind of things have you learned being a part of this app?
So going back to that moment that I met Amy and, you know, our clicking, you know, that feeling of something feeling right was really insightful, actually. Now I realize that, you know, you can know those things. You can know whether or not, because stepping into a business partnership with somebody can, you know, it's daunting because, you know, it's a long journey. There's blood, sweat and tears going into the project. You just want to make sure you're working with the right person. But she really was that person for me. And obviously I was for her. And the team that we grew, you've met, Lenise, you've met some of our team, and absolutely amazing women, you know, women I call friends, you know, women that I've learned so much from. And we've managed to have a kind of beautiful experience while working incredibly hard. So I guess, you know, to answer your question, I think that people, you know, they're obviously your vibe attracts your tribe. Yeah. I know that feels kind of a bit frivolous, but that's really how it felt, you know, growing Moody, and everyone that was engaged with it and came on board has felt completely right, the right fit. Yeah.
So work with people that you connect with, not only on a kind of business level, but on a personal level as well.
Well, I think that maybe it's kind of too much for me to say, you know, you must connect with them on a personal level, because, you know, maybe it was a luxury and it was a real gift for us at this time and for me. And it was just more of a luck thing as well. But yes, obviously, if you can work with people that you enjoy and that you get, then that makes the experience of working such long hours and giving your all to much more enjoyable. But I guess it's also interesting that, we were creating a product that a bunch of us women were creating a product that, of course, there have been other apps, and there are other apps, very successful ones that are period trackers, but how we were doing our app or how we presented it was different. And we were the 4 phases and kind of breaking things down in a slightly different way, and very much focused on moods as well. And that working as women, working on an app like that was obviously, that's kind of like what connects us. Like we were all in our different ways experiencing our periods or cycles or hormones or whatever. And so we had lots to talk about. So it was a nice space. And we all knew when anyone was on a period, because we had it on a board. Yeah. So we'd know who's in which phase, so we could give tasks to them based on their phase of their menstrual cycle.
That's amazing. I love that. Talk for listeners who don't really know what that means. Can you talk about what sort of tasks you would typically suggest for each phase of the menstrual cycle?
Okay, I mean, I was probably exaggerating a bit more, but what I was saying is that we were definitely more gentle or considerate or whatever around around people's phases. But as our 4 phases have quite common patterns with most women. So and these patterns of emotional and physical experiences are following the patterns of our hormonal fluctuations. So the rising of estrogen and progesterone, the dropping of these things, the rising of testosterone throughout the cycle can influence how we feel energetically, how we feel around sleep, how we feel sexually, how we feel emotionally. So yes, I don't know, do you really want me to go through the 4?
No, you don't.
Go check out Moody Month and Lanice's Instagram or something, and you'll learn all about
it. If for listeners who want to know more, there are quite a few episodes where we get into each of the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. But as Lola says, the Moody Month app is an amazing resource, and I would encourage anyone who hasn't downloaded it to download it and really dig into how you can track your cycle across each of the 4 phases through the app and connect it with your moods, and then go deeper if you want to, or just do it at a really high level. If they want to download the app, how do they do that?
So downloading the app, it's free download from the App Store, so you can just put in Moody Month, you'll find it, and then that's it. I would also like to say, and I've mentioned it before, but with Moody Month, it was also such an exciting project to start, because it was this idea of being able to provide for free at the moment this incredibly sort of detailed and progressive information to women across the world. That, of course, there are books now that are written about a lot of the work that we have in our app, but in terms of an app, in terms of nutrition, in terms of medical content, often this kind of information you would get from a private consultation, as we do. And being in private practice as a nutritional therapist, you unfortunately, the NHS here in the UK, they don't employ nutritional therapists very regularly. So, the only way that we can offer our services is through paid for service. So I love the fact that I'm able to put all this information out there in the app, the content that I've written and studied hard for and share with my private practice, but I can actually put this in the app, and it's great, brilliant information.
What I love about your journey is that you studied originally, you had your degree, you studied, and you became a nutritional therapist, but then you took a different path. So, of course, you still have your clinical practice, but I think it's a really good example for anyone who's listening who is currently studying and thinking, well, I don't necessarily want to strictly work in clinic or worked with people on a one-to-one basis, to show them that there are other routes that can be taken. You know, you can found a business, you can go deeper into your area of specialism and then build a business around that. So I think what you're doing is incredible. I love the app. And if listeners want to learn more about you and working with you, how would they connect with you?
Okay, so the first part of that question about learning about taking your nutrition knowledge after graduation and looking at which other avenues you can take in rather than just being in private practice, or you may decide not to be in private practice at all, but what can you do with this qualification is such a great question, Lenise, because I know that when I was studying, I found it really intense. It was a full-time degree. I was just totally like in this kind of like serious academic zone for so long. And by the time I finished, I felt like, oh my God, I've just been so serious for so long. And I just wasn't sure if I could sit in a clinic space kind of quite solitary. I wasn't sure if I could do it. So I had to take a small break before I actually stepped into clinical practice. But yeah, I guess if I had known that there were options like either working for an app or starting your own and working with a team, that would have been really, really exciting to have known that that's a possibility. And it's a whole other thing because, as I say, I have been working with a big team, meeting people. I deal with them on a daily basis, connected to a whole kind of world of, female tech amazing people. So there's a whole load of learnings that I've had through that. But obviously alongside it, I've had to always have my clinical practice because, those living, breathing skills, you have to have them. You have to understand what that clinical encounter is in real life. Otherwise, you're only being theoretical. So my advice around that is never, definitely have your clinical experience. Don't be scared. Just go for it. Find your niche, find what it is that interests you and become good at that area because you can't be good at all areas. Well, you can, I suppose, but, you'll be very good in one particular area and people will come to you as well if they know that you're specialized in one particular area. And then look around. There are some colleges, I don't know where you studied, but I remember advertising when we first started Moody, and I was looking for practitioners, naturopathic practitioners to come and to write content and stuff. And I advertised at some well-known natural health colleges in London. So always look at notice boards as well and see who's publishing what and also who's advertising what kinds of positions and explore. So that was part one of your question, and now I've talked too long. I can't remember the second part.
If listeners really connect with you and they want to find out more about you and working with you in your private clinic, how would they connect with you?
Okay, so for sure, email me is the best thing. You can find my contact details on my web platform, which is lolaross.com. Which is the preferred method, and we can take it from there. But at the moment, and you've probably been doing the same, since lockdown and everything, my clinic actually closed, which is, sad, and my clinical physical space closed, which is, it's a shame. But so working on, virtual sessions has been absolutely brilliant and actually, expanded my clients and my patients to a much kind of broader, different countries around the world. So there are limitations with that, but, I love that clinical encounter that seeing and seeing someone in the flesh, but I guess that will come back. So but at the moment, I'm online.
Okay, great. And all the details will be in the show notes. If listeners take one thing from all of the brilliant pearls of wisdom that you've shared today, what would you want that to be?
I think it has to be for women listening who are, I think probably the thing I'd leave is that keep listening to your body, tap into the intelligence of your body, and realize that what's happening for you now may not be what's happening for you next year. Our bodies change, our cycles change, our environment changes, and all of those things can contribute to menstrual health changes. So yes, I would say just keep aware of that, and remember that your period is, or your menstrual cycle is important, an important part of your kind of health and well-being in terms of keeping it in balance.
Tap into the intelligence of your cycle. I love that. I think that's so important. Thank you so much for coming onto the show, Lola. It's been wonderful to speak to you.
You're so welcome, honey. You're so good. And thank you for doing this brilliant podcast. I mean, I know you've been at it for a while, and, you've had some amazing guests. And, I think, sharing those stories, our period stories is just one of those important steps of continuing to break down taboos, and understanding that we're all sharing a similar story. They may be different stories, but ultimately they're around our hormones.
For more inspiring conversations, head over to periodstorypod.com, where we have so many more for you to peruse. If you want help with your menstrual or hormone health, email me on hello@eatlovemove.com to set up a free 30-minute hormone health review. If you like today's show, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Tag us, come say hi, and send in your requests for who you'd like to see on the show on Instagram and Twitter on @periodstorypod, or email us at hello@periodstorypod.com. I'm Lenny's Brothers, and you've been listening to Period Story. Thank you so much for listening.